the venture industry is no longer just backing shields, they're backing swords, right? What's the over-under on time before direct conflict reemerges between the United States and Iran? How many days?
I think as soon as Israel breaks the peace, Iran will follow suit and America will get dragged back in. First of all, it was aliens. Aliens took out that helicopter, and they don't want to admit that they're interfering in our wars now.
For those doubters about whether Saronic is actually fielding capability that's doing real world operations, here you go. U.S. Navy's Fifth Fleet's Task Force 59 deployed this Corsair. It navigated to the pilot's location. Pilots were, rescued.
Attention humans, we're not here to harm you. Please get on the boat.
Okay, gents. There's peace in the Middle East at last. At long last, there's peace in the Middle East. Here's my question. How long does it last between there are shots fired between Iran and the United States? Israel, there's always going to be that. There's going to be something with Israel at some point, always. But like for the United States, how long? What's the over-under on time before direct conflict reemerges between the United States and Iran? How many days?
I think as soon as Israel breaks the peace, Iran will follow suit, and America will get dragged back in.
I hear you. Israel could break the peace. I hear you.
They didn't sign up for it.
Iran could also.
Right,
Lebanon,
but like Israel
Lebanon
was not in the negotiation, and then but they are covered by the deal. That's like the main problem that I see is that it says the U.S. and its allies. I'm like, ooh, none of the allies were a part of this negotiation. So if I was Israel, I'd be like, I didn't sign that, and then the whole thing falls apart.
And there's tacit and perhaps even explicit linkage now between Iran and Lebanon. Like in the MoU, in the Islamabad MoU, and that to me is just like you're asking for a flashpoint. Everybody's looking for a mechanism.
As soon as Israel hits Hezbollah, they have violated it.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, like you've invalidated. You set up wild conditions for it to be invalid. And if I'm Iran, as soon as Israel invalidates, I go like, okay, cool. Well, the bet's off. You didn't hold to the deal.
Totally. I read the New York Times kind of summary of the Islamabad MoU, and it was actually like, I would say like hopeful and at some level rigorous. But like it was quite obvious, at least in that commentary and reading the text of the MoU, like it has language like the United States will begin to plan to do things. It's very diplomatic kind of doublespeak where you have infinite latitude to do anything, but you're kind of like indicating that you hope that there's peace. So, all right. So how many days? Simon?
30
days. Dave, you?
31.
31.
Because we're going Price is Right style. So I'm saying 31 because I was going to say 60. So I'm going 31.
This is Price is Right. 31. Okay. I'm very pessimistic. I think 10. I think 10 days and there is something touches it off again. I think
there's the Dispatch has a writer now named Mike Nelson, who's this former Army Special Forces guy that I think is a really smart writer on this. He's a fellow at a bunch of different places. He just wrote an article about it, and he is much less merciful. And I think because he, in a lot of ways, agreed more with the policy conclusions that a conflict like this was driving towards, i.e. liberating Iran, striking Hezbollah, degrading these capabilities. And it all lands back in the same place that the JCPOA is in, is like you make these deals and anyone who doesn't agree with your politics looks at your deal and goes, you have no mechanism to enforce.
Totally.
And like, that's the only place where I'm sympathetic to the Trump admin, where I'm like, none of you, there is no mechanism to enforce. You either have to get these people to stick to their word or you kill all of them. And we don't have the stomach for it.
Yeah,
and I don't have the stomach for it. I think it's a bad way of doing business, but like at some point you have to trust people.
I'm sure you're just going to keep
doing this.
I'm sure there's a middle way between those two goalposts, your bookends that you just laid out. Kill everybody, or
how do you keep them honest without violence when you've already killed a lot of them? Like, what is the middle way when we're already in the killing phase?
I actually think that what this war demonstrated is that a regime like Iran's is roughly resilient to hard military intervention.
Super resilient.
but they weaponized the economic pressure and the global reliance on the Strait of Hormuz and oil prices and the ripple effects of the economic impact. And so I actually do think that that demonstrated, at least on the Iranian side, that there is immense leverage for those willing to engage in serious economic warfare, which is not
but they've
killing
been under
everybody,
that for,
and it's not,
But they've been under that economic pressure for decades. That has done, and like all of the things that we said.
No.
Hey,
I'm saying the opposite direction. The reason why the West and the United States is like at the negotiating table trying to go for peace and not starving them out or, continuing an embargo or continuing a blockage, a U.S. naval blockage of the Strait of Hormuz is because there's immense global economic pressure on the United States to do that, right? I'm saying the Iranians have effectively leveraged the economic
right.
weaponage, weaponry here.
And like we've been trying to play the economic button for a long time. Like it's clear that like that won't work. We're in like a real. Let's be clear. We are in the hard dilemma here. They are going to continue to be the thing that they are, and they've shown like a willingness to continue to be that bad actor. I don't.
Yeah, agree. Yeah,
what have we gotten?
Well, here's what we've got. We've got whatever it was, a $1.8 million publicly traded space launch company. That's what we've got over here in America.
True. We do have that.
And we have the world's first trillionaire, at least on paper, publicly acknowledged.
The American people do own that. It's a collectively owned company.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's like a meme stock, but it's got a rocket launch company behind it, and a bunch of other stuff. And apparently, it was really an AI company, which is kind of confusing for those in my world observing things. But congratulations to the SpaceX team. I read a stat that on the day of the IPO, something like 1,000 millionaires were minted, like early employees who held onto the stock and everything else. I mean, pretty cool. Again, the Elon Musk juggernaut rolls forward. All right. With all of that, Simon is pinned between Dave and Garrett bookends on the over-under. I'm at 10 days. Simon's at 30. Dave's at 31. That gives Simon about 20 days of window. I guess I've only got 10, but I got to say,
you've only got 10, yeah.
I think the trend is on my side, and Dave gets the catch-all prices right back end of it. Okay. I'm Garrett Smith. Welcome to the Goat Rodeo podcast. I'm joined by my regular co-host, Simon Coon, and Dave Caudle. Dave Caudle back from the cold, coming back in from the cold. Welcome back, Dave. We haven't seen you in a few weeks. We've missed some good conversations with you, but we made do. We muddled on. Okay. I'm going to drop some Defense Venture kind of headliner content here, and feel free to jump in if you hate any of this content or if you have commentary. So first off, a company called PicoGrid, relevant in Reveal Technologies ecosystem, just raised a $45 million Series A, led by Bessemer and joined by a couple of others, as I understand it. And congratulations to those guys. This is kind of infrastructure, networking, comms, and call it autonomy enablement in this tactical edge ecosystem. And we've been following them for quite some time. So PicoGrid, I'll take a pause there. Any commentary from the co-host crowd?
They are interesting. We've been interacting with or watching them for a while. I think he hit the nail on the head. It's usually described as an integration layer. There's tons of sensors or tons of folks building sensors, drones, radars, EW payloads, AI models, C2 systems, and all of those capabilities need integration. It's unclear to me if they are becoming direct competitors with the Palantirs and Anduril Lattice of the world. I don't know, but I think the assumption is that there's plenty of space there, even if they are.
Absolutely, there's space there. It's a giant, varied, heterogeneous, world of technologies present in that ecosystem, and a huge need for integrating all those things, from sensors to drones, C2 layers, and everything else. So, congrats to those guys. Next up, High Ground, led by a talented former U.S. Army Green Beret guy named John Price, announced just yesterday at the time of recording and 2 days ago at the time of publication of this podcast that his company High Ground raised a $6.5 million seed round. Now, usually that's kind of early small dollars for the news content that we sling here at the Goat Rodeo, but it was led by Reveal investor, Next Frontier Capital, and GP Les Craig and team over there. We have a high regard for them and think a lot of John Price. I met him at the MVS event in San Francisco earlier this year. Really talented guy. And High Ground is positioning itself as the intelligence layer for defense capital markets. In other words, it's kind of like it's an investor and finance world set of tools that allow for some amount of data analysis and diligence to be completed on a semi-autonomous or an AI-enabled basis, as I understand it, and it's tailored specifically for the defense technology market. Simon, what was that company that we talked about a while ago that kind of does the autonomous scraping and analysis on programs, program health, and kind of like the customer side, the market side of the defense technology ecosystem? You got really excited about it. There were a couple of these. Shield Capital invested. Do you remember what I'm talking about?
I don't know that I was excited. I think I was pretty pessimistic about them. There's several of them, and some are more interesting than others, but there's like Usul and Prism, and there's a bunch of these folks now that have like created these AI agentic capabilities to, pierce the paper bureaucracy of navigating the DoD. I'm still very much in the camp of there's really no replacement for the human individual. Like this information is still just information. It's only as good as the entity that has to go execute it. And then also, I'm very concerned about the whole concept of garbage in and garbage out. And I generally think most of the paperwork that the DoD produces is garbage. And so you've just gotten a really efficient access to summarized garbage, and
it is
no real mechanism of parsing out which of it was good and which of it was bad.
In
my opinion.
It is garbage, but that's some of these companies, Simon, will actually also take defense contracts directly from the customer to make sense of government data and then provide the results of that data back to them. So the United States government's going, hey, we recognize that this is so convoluted. We need you to assess our own data and give us a report from it. As they're selling the same service out to industry, which is wild. Big of,
as is often the case with DoD, right? Like it's, one story. So you'll have one program office who's like crushing it and like, hey, I need you to do this, and I'm going to be a helpful partner and produce useful stuff so that we can make better outcomes here. And you'll have another one who's like, I don't care. They can scrape through my J books and just get nothing and not understand what we're doing at all. So I think there's probably places where things like Usul and Prism are really good at providing insight into that program office because that program office is like an interesting partner versus other places where it's like you have no way of knowing how this agent has parsed through and decided what is the important and valuable information for you to understand and what was like chaff that was just thrown into all the documentation that it's scraping to throw people off the trail. I mean, like imagine if I'm going to put a real sharp example on it. NGC2. NGC2 this year is getting like 20 different budget lines collapsed into 4. So if I'm looking at one of these scrapers from a year or two ago, I'm seeing all these different lines and I'm tracking where they're going and I'm trying to pay attention, and they all disappear next year. And like, there's just no way of scraping the open source to find out that they're all about to disappear. You have to, or you find out when it happens.
I mean, these agents can do a lot of things, Simon. I don't know if you've ever asked ChatGPT to create a funny cat meme, but it's very, very good at doing things you didn't think it could do. And so maybe, the equivalent in the defense JBook scrape is that they can pull rabbits out of a hat and actually and actually discover some of the nuance that you're describing. I mean, that is like the promise of AI, that it will kind of learn over time the nuance that a human analyst would apply in looking at some of this stuff. It probably isn't there, but I mean, that is honestly, it's the promise of a high ground for the fintech or the finance industry or the venture industry looking at defense tech deals. That is the promise of those platforms that you were mentioning a second ago about, analysis for defense programming and defense market and all of that stuff. All right, let's move off that one. I'm trying to rip through some of these news items so we can get to the meaty content of the
aliens.
agenda that you always, that's always hovering in the back of my mind.
It's all coming back to aliens.
It is always going to come back to aliens. So we haven't actually talked a lot about cyber activity, but there was big news just this week, June 17th. So again, yesterday at the time of recording, 2 days ago from time of posting the podcast, the company 20 announced a $100 million Series B that closed the post money at just above $1 billion. That was led by Excel, heavy participation from Point 72's Caffeinated Capital, Friends of Family Capital, and a few others. InQtel was in the mix early on. It's only 2 or 3 years old, as I understand it, this company 20, but it is probably tip of the iceberg on an emerging offensive cyber industry that will emerge and then serve, the likes of NSA, Cyber Command, and the probably foreign entities that are working alongside the United States in developing and fielding offensive cyber capability. Founded by Joe Lin, former Navy Reserve officer. He comes from Palo Alto Networks, kind of heritage. Palo Alto Networks and a bunch of others are prolific, big legacy players in the cyber arena. And so they describe their products as AI-enabled end-to-end platforms for industrializing offensive cyber operations, and count, as I mentioned a moment ago, U.S. Cyber Command as a major customer. With InQtel in the mix, you can probably guess at who else is buying and working with this company. But it's exciting, this might be the rise of cyber as the premier growth category in the defense arena. Comments on offensive cyber, this emergence of a new kind of hot category within the defense ecosystem.
So when they publicly launched 20, I saw a quote from Joe referring to them as the first and only venture-backed cyber warfare startup, which may or may not. I mean, I don't know enough about like the offensive cyberspace, but I will say most of the folks in that space do not talk out loud about being offensive cyber warfare oriented. There's like a strong incentive to stay off the radar because
That's right.
bad actors are now like aggressively targeting you. So I for sure what I'll say he is the only one in that space that I've seen talking about it as loud and proud and doing big rounds like this. Like it's just, you see that a lot for defensive cyber. You've seen it like historically in what we think of as cybersecurity companies, but they are billing themselves as a weapons company. Right? Like they are in the fight, which both from like a capability perspective is a really interesting piece of like future warfare. And then I think from how venture is talked about in the public space perspective, I think it's super interesting because I think it lends itself really well to a story and getting people excited and doing the kinds of things that you need to get investors excited, in my opinion. But it comes with a lot of like international geopolitical risk to tell people that you're building these kinds of weapons. Like you're basically, every hacker farm in Eastern Europe is now like, oh, cool, I can definitely make money if I can just crack open one of these dudes at 20 through some social engineering or whatever you have, and sell it to the Chinese or sell it to, big Russia, whatever it looks like. So I'm excited. I think it's cool stuff, and I think there's going to be more of it. But, first through the breach in a lot of ways, and I wouldn't be surprised if some noses get bloodied.
First through the breach in the sense that they are loud and proud about it, right? This is a loud venture capital play that's making no bones about who they are. I do think that this investment into 20 and their $1 billion valuation is cracking a big milestone in the sense that traditionally venture capitalists were very interested in backing mostly defensive or passive surveillance type cyber projects, and now are definitively getting into the offensive cyber game. And there were all kinds of regulatory and ethical concerns for venture capitalists, deploying LP dollars into this sector of the industry. But I think it's an example that the venture industry is no longer just backing shields; they're backing swords, right? In that kind of like warfare, implement of warfare parlance. So,
And AI, the sprinkling some AI on it lends itself really well to offensive cyber because what I imagine, again, I'm probably as ignorant as Simon is on actual offensive cyber capabilities, but I've always envisioned it's very manual. Like it takes a lot of very highly trained, specialized people to employ offensive cyber effects. So that probably lends itself very well to intersecting it with artificial intelligence capabilities.
it's one of those yeah. and it's one of those evergreen categories, right? So, I mean, as long as there are digital networks, there will be digital protective measures that need to emerge to protect, the new paradigm. And there will be bad actors, or perhaps, military or intelligence community offensive and surveillance capabilities that are out there. So I think we're likely to see more and more of this over time. Although, to Simon's point, perhaps not quite so loud. I mean,
I mean,
I think that
I was going to ask, has anyone ever heard of a large cyber attack where a company claimed credit for the tool?
no, actually, no, but there have been plenty of like attributions, and a lot
Sure.
of
I mean,
it goes back to like Israeli cyber outfits, right? So
yeah.
like,
I mean, we're
former,
familiar with Stuxnet and, obviously Maduro and all these different things. However, when a Patriot gets used, we talk about the Patriot,
it's true.
right? Like there's just,
Yeah.
I'm just kind of racking my brain right now. I'm like, this is a very interesting space. Cause like, let's say you land a huge contract. Who do you tell? Let's say your stuff gets used by Delta when they go do a thing. Who do you tell?
You
What,
tell
what's what's what's
you
the news
tell
story?
you tell you're bored in a skiff,
Yeah, you tell your
or
board and skip.
or you have a very curated data room for an investor so that they understand what you're doing, what you're about. An example of this would be that there were many companies that kind of claimed to the venture industry to have been involved with the spider's web attack the Ukrainians executed against Russian strategic bomber assets or strategic aircraft assets deep inside Russian territory. And like, to your point, like some of those are just kind of cynical grab for attention, and they may or may not have been involved. Some of them I know were very quiet about it and implied things and then provided unique access and data rooms to some of the information. And some of those companies were very loud and proud. We were the company that did X and Y and Z, which is kind of what we're seeing in this kind of like new age of warfare, most prominently within the Ukraine-Russia context, where Ukrainian frontline units actually raise money from private backers by developing a marketing ground game, right? So like an attribution and claiming credit, sort of a ground game for new technology, new TTPs, and all that stuff.
Yeah, that's the tricky piece, right? Is like the nature of raising capital is you need a good story, and people need to know who you are and be excited about the possibility of return. And the nature of offensive cyber is like, don't tell anyone, whatever you do.
Yeah, and so venture capitalists are very excited to tell their own stories and toot their own horns once big wins come in. I I would guess that the profile of investors piling money into cyber offense companies is probably a different cast of investor than we have seen historically. Historically, they were probably quieter niche shops in the venture landscape, or they were inherently quiet private equity players or corporate venture capital teams piling money into stuff that they would end up acquiring. That sort of thing. Yep. Okay, well, I've run all the bases, and I think I'm back on home plate with defense venture activity. I will pass the mic over to Simon. You want to talk about
I want to talk about
Apache aircraft?
aliens.
The last time,
but
hold on, I will note the last time we talked about Apaches, they were buzzing Kid Rock's house, and there were like Army officers, lieutenants.
were those
or Chief
Apaches
Warrant.
or Blackhawks?
I thought they were Apaches. I could be wrong.
I'm
Like,
pretty
I'm not
sure.
sure.
I'm pretty sure it was
This is
AH-64s.
I think it was 64s. I think it was Apaches. Yeah.
That's way
And
crazier than a Blackhawk.
I think Secretary Hegseth or somebody got involved and like stopped the investigation of misappropriation of aircraft or something. I might be misremembering the story here, but it was that was the last time we talked about Apaches. This is a perennial subject, though, Simon. So take us off.
I mean, I think there might be good reason to not fly your Apache low and slow to the ground anymore, based off of what we saw in Iran. But it's a really like unusual, anomalous event for a lot of reasons. And Defense News just ran a pretty good rundown. Although I don't know if they followed all the threads to like their possible end conclusion. But the long story short version of this, and there's a couple of news stories in here, is that an Apache was shot down. Maybe not intentionally, but certainly was shot down. It collided for sure with a Shaheed type drone. and that the crew survived and had to be rescued. That sentence alone is enough to like raise the hackles of anybody who knows a little bit about a Shaheed or an Apache or landing in the water. Like none of this makes any sense. Shaheeds don't hit aircraft. Dave and I were talking about this. They call it an unusual incident. An unusual incident. I'm like, I think it's an unprecedented incident. Has any helicopter ever been hit by a Shaheed? And also, has any helicopter ever been hit? Has anything been hit by a Shaheed that didn't blow up and kill everyone that was there? Like, it screams at me that this was not like a collision with the warhead of the Shaheed or the explosive that failed to make meaningful contact, which makes me think that it's like possibly an accidental collision or evasive maneuvers were successful. But like if the Shaheed hits you head on, everyone alive's get cooked. Like that is a missile. That is a missile with a good amount of guidance. And to this point, we don't know of Shaheeds that, and I'm sure there are some folks developing them, but we don't know of Shaheeds at this point that are being like controlled to such a level to target anything in the air. They're designed to hit stuff on the ground, vehicles sometimes, right? But like that's not an anti-air weapon like that, and it just hit the most exquisite attack helicopter that the Army's got, which is covered in weapons that you would hope could shoot other stuff down. That right there. First of all, it was aliens. Aliens took out that helicopter, and they don't want to admit that they're interfering in our wars now.
The word of art here is NHI, or non-human intelligence, Simon.
Yeah, that's what it was. That Shaheed was snatched by a little green man who hopped off mid-flight and pulled down the Apache, but he didn't want to kill anybody. But then, you get to the next part of it, which is that an interesting news story all by itself was the idea that these two crew members were saved by, another unmanned vehicle.
I want to talk about this. I want to talk about this. So this is unprecedented as well. This is the first ever.
Yeah.
So, and it involves the defense technology industry because this was the
Shaheeds also involves the defense tech. This is like every step of this is future warfare, man.
It's wild. So a 24-foot uncrewed autonomous surface vessel, a Corsair variant from Saronic Technologies. So like for those doubters about whether Saronic is actually fielding capability that's doing real world operations, here you go.
I'm still a doubter, for the record.
U.S. Navy's Fifth Fleet's Task Force 59 deployed this Corsair. It navigated to the pilot's location. Pilots were, rescued, pulled out of the water. It says pulled out of the water. I don't understand what that means in this story. They probably climbed aboard the Corsair, right? Like, I don't think there were like robot arms grabbing these
Attention
guys.
Humans, we're not here to harm you. Please get on the boat.
Yeah, exactly.
Just a loudspeaker telling you, don't worry, get on the boat.
And they were taken not taken, Simon, but
they were taken.
moved to a secondary location where they were picked up by a conventional heavy lift transport helicopter of some kind, completely uninjured. To your earlier point.
Yes, you used a phrase earlier, non-human intelligence. Another non-human intelligence showed up and somehow moved these men from the water to the boat and took off with them, and everyone's fine. But I think huge good news story, first of all, for Task Force 59. Whether or not the Navy can obviously for Saronic. My big question with these vehicles, and it still is kind of unanswered, is can Big Navy figure this out? I have no doubt that Task Force 59 and CENTCOM is doing lots of interesting stuff that Big Navy hasn't even considered. How do I work this into the formation? How do I deploy and sustain? But it's a great, this is one of the ways in which it can look, taste, feel, smell, the use of unmanned medium range vessels in contested waters to do dangerous, hairy stuff. I'd be interested to know, if you're the Navy and you're looking at that and you're where else are Corsairs? What formations are they in? I bet you the answer is they're just there. They're not they're not deployed the way Task Force 59 is deploying them anywhere else, because Task Force 59 is a singular entity inside of the Navy.
Totally. It's Task Force Red Hill in the Pacific, I think is what they're called.
Yeah.
Red something. Red Dawn. Can't be Red Dawn, right? It's Red Hill.
Can't be Red. It's probably Red Hill. But even then, even if they tried to replicate this 1-to-1, right, that probably wouldn't work because the distances are so much longer in the Indo-Pacific that they probably need a different flavor of this thing to even try to replicate something like that, I would assume. But
it probably depends on the ranges involved, right? Who knows? Yeah,
Yeah.
who knows?
But when's the last time we saw a story that had this many, like, pretty sizable disruptions
Totally
in one
massive.
singular, like, 6-hour event? Your Apaches
Yeah.
are now vulnerable.
Yeah.
Robot boats can save people out of the water. Shaheeds can hit planes. People can survive Shaheed attacks. None of this had happened yet. Crazy.
And it's another
The answer is
example of
aliens. It didn't
it's
happen.
another
Aliens did it.
it's also another example of a very expensive, exquisite legacy platform crashing, getting hit, whatever, call it whatever you want, and then lower cost autonomous platforms coming in to rescue and do other things. And so I think this is, to your point, like the future is now, right? The future is coming. We're seeing it play out right before our eyes.
That's what,
And it
that's
feeds
actually where that,
into the thing Dave wants to talk about, because like I really want you to do, Dave, because I know what your topic is I want to what could have been done to make this Apache more survivable? That's what I wanted.
That's going to be your entree to CCA. All right. Try and thread that needle,
Yeah,
Dave. Go
Dave.
for it.
I have a thought, but I'm gonna let you run first.
could have made the flying tank more survivable in this engagement. It's not the one that's attempting to do the intercept. That's the answer. Either we remove the humans that we then have to recover in the fallen angel situation, in this situation, or it is quarterbacking something else that is conducting the intercept. I mean, we've used
Wingman.
We've used AH-64s as FAC-As for a long time, or forward area controllers, terminal controllers for a long time. The author of this article suggests that it is then quarterbacking smaller robotic systems that are actually conducting the intercepts, if it is susceptible to an attack like a Shaheed. And the interesting thing here, so I think you hit it, but breezed over it. The real interesting thing about this to me was, and kind of made the point, the Shaheed or Shaheed, I still don't know what's correct there, is typically executing a pre-planned route to go strike, a rail car or something. I don't know if we were interacting, if it did actually intentionally strike the AH-64, if it's the version of the Shaheed that we are familiar with, or if it is operating now differently in a hunt and kill AH-64 sort of capacity, or if the whole thing was just an accident. But it's creates space, and the AH-64 becomes the quarterback. Is that what you were going to say, Simon? Is the answer?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think, particularly as we shift into a CCA conversation, if you want to be able to stop drones that are non-human intelligences or human-crafted non-human intelligences, faster than a human can react, put some robots in the sky with you, right? I think, like, into that quarterbacking conversation, there's this future where you need some attritable systems. I mean, you could do a mothership scenario where the Apache's launching its own drones as countermeasures, or full-blown CCA type robotic wingmen who are flying a little bit further out specifically for air defense and coordinating like the heavier fires off the big Apache.
So
There's a lot. It opens up a lot of like interesting potential COAs as you think about, okay, all the successful stuff here was a robot. The answer is probably going to be more robots.
So I think all of the offices that modernize our rotary wing capabilities in the United States Army, modernize our unmanned ground vehicles, or our ground vehicles in general, I think all of those offices have been paying lots of attention to collaborative combat aircraft. And for the uninitiated, one of the biggest stories this week is the Air Force Collaborative Combat Aircraft, goes by CCA. This is, think semi-autonomous like Wingman for an actual manned aircraft, designed to fly alongside them. The Air Force selected Anduril and General Atomics to build the first operational fleet. And I think that we're talking about as early as 27 here, with plans to build 150. And then by the end of the decade, they're looking at 1,000 systems. So the really interesting part here is, I think that there was always been a healthy amount of skepticism if these vendors can pull off the requirements or the objectives of the program. So it's interesting that we're actually moving forward to production. It's also pretty interesting that they're maintaining a separate competition for the autonomy software stack. They're separating the hardware and software. They're being treated as separate layers, which is also super interesting. But to your point, Simon, I think every office that is attempting to modernize a fleet, whether it's ground, sea, air, or rotary wing is looking to see if the Air Force is going to pull this off, because I think that we've now engaged with everybody that buys vehicles has had some semblance of this strategy. With we're not going to go completely unmanned. There's still going to be a quarterback, but they're going to be throwing the ball to a team of robotic systems.
Dave, do we know the software topic that you teed up? So hardware awards are out. Anduril and GA are building the production FQ44 Alpha and the FQ42 Alpha from General Atomics, Anduril and General Atomics, respectively. The software competition continues. I'm reading through the notes here. Those in the mix include Anduril, General Atomics, of course, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, RTX, Collins, so this is Raytheon backbone, and then Shield AI, which was awarded a concurrent production contract previously on this topic. So are they recompeting it? Are they just opening up the field again? And then what do we expect? My real question, this is where I was going with this, instead of just rambling, but the real question is, do we know anything about the contract award timeline for that competition and the software production award?
I don't. I might be missing something. I think that the sentiment that I got was they were happy with, the customer was happy with the two hardware systems that had been produced, and selected two prototypes, and they didn't think or feel like they had a good enough solution yet to move forward with production on the software side.
Yeah,
and that's still
They're
requires some
doing
testing,
like
and
a whole
risk
new
reduction.
type of contract for that software, which they refer to as a fee exposure strategy. But they're able to like buy licenses from all 6 of the vendors now. So essentially, they did like a more traditional version, which Anduril lost and Shield won, and now the Air Force has kind of gone back and said, actually, we're going to bring all you back on and buy licenses from all of you, and kind of make them, sounds like, fight for their dinner on a regular basis.
Smart.
The economics here are very interesting.
You have to keep competition alive in that space specifically, because software is actually where the true kind of autonomy value lives, right? And the ability for an autonomous piece of hardware, no matter how advanced, to get inside of and accelerate beyond an adversary OODA loop. I'm reading in my notes that the primary mission autonomy provider will be selected and ready for install by summer of 2027. So that's right in line with Dave's comments about the early kind of tranche 1 of production CCA hardware being delivered. I'm seeing some numbers here, which is really interesting. So CCA program is targeting a fleet of between 1,000 and 1,500 total aircraft. Increment 1 specifications require the uncrewed jets to possess a combat radius of at least 700 nautical miles and the speed to keep pace with the manned or crewed fighter wings while carrying out semi-autonomous strike, sensor scouting, or electronic jamming missions with minimal human pilot workload and cognitive input. That's a short description of CCA writ large.
So here's a piece I was looking at that I haven't seen a lot of reporting on, but I think is the assumed underpinning of this conversation is cost, right? So a CCA is supposed to be about $30 million a pop, which, an F-35 is $85-90 million a pop. The newest versions of the F-15s are $70-80 million a pop. And those require like massive bulk buys just to get down to that price point. But what I found that's pretty interesting is the original version of the F-15, if you like inflated the dollars, was about $30 million. So a CCA costs about as much as the F-15 bought when we originally made F-15s. So essentially, we're recreating the cost ratio that we had when we were originally putting jets into the Air Force, which hopefully will enable them to like get back to a fleet size. The Air Force is tiny compared to what it was in the 80s, 90s, 70s, 60s, of course. So the question is, can you get mass back? Can you really drive that cost down? But these are not cheap by any means. They're $30 million.
That probably doesn't factor, and maybe it does, but it probably doesn't factor in the long tail of support and maintenance, which hopefully the government and the industry side get smart about it and shift as much of that onto the vendor as possible, allowing for kind of the right to repair stuff that we've talked about in this podcast previously. So there's that element. And then you also don't have the manpower burden of training.
Yeah, think about the manpower switch, right?
Totally.
That thing shows up and can fly. That's crazy. That's a revolution in how the Air Force operates. Like, here's 100 planes. You've already got the pilots. Like, you don't have to train any more people. You're just going to attach them to the guys you've already trained.
Or perhaps you're even training fewer people, but it is a different training pipeline, right? There is a different set of requirements and whatever codes and TTPs and training packages. New schoolhouses are going to open up for these pilots who are now going to be, orchestrators of a drone swarm at high altitude. It's pretty interesting.
So
everyone should go home and watch the movie Stealth featuring Jamie Foxx. If you're wondering how this is going to work, this is going to be exactly like that.
The fee exposure.
And then you can shift into yet another podcast favorite starring Fox and Cruise, Collateral. We don't need to reopen that.
There's no AI in Collateral, but it's a unlike Stealth, it's an actually good movie. So you could do both. Little shot chaser situation.
Yeah, there you go. Shot chaser situation. Yeah. Which you would know everything about, Simon.
Yeah,
being a lifelong non-drinker,
known alcohol drinker, and fan of being smelly and embarrassing in public.
That's when you do it. That's when you do it to excess. So maybe you're just hanging out with people who have shown that to be the logical endpoint of enjoying a beverage or one.
Yeah, I've been to a bar.
Or whatever.
I've seen bars before.
This podcast does not endorse drinking alcohol in any way. We simply notice that it is a cultural trend. Dave, I think this is your topic. Do you want to round it out?
Yeah, I think that CCA makes a ton of sense. I think that we'll start seeing this for, again, every vehicle in the U.S. Department of War, Department of Defense. I am a little concerned about the fee exposure strategy. I think that can really shoot us in the foot. I understand what the Air Force is trying to accomplish. They're trying to control costs, but that probably looks like controlling the margins of the software vendors. De-incentivizing the software players they really want building this autonomy stack and making it look like old school, systems integrator type work, where if you're only allowed to make 12 to 14% in profit, you're going to get Northrop Grumman. And probably not the best in class autonomous pilot. That is my concern.
We shall see. I actually think that might be the topic to follow as this thing unfolds from the defense technology kind of venture-backed ecosystem, because it will either serve to motivate non-traditionals to enter with venture backing and shift more and more toward private sector and private capital-backed projects, revitalizing and innovating in the defense sector, or it will turn out to be exactly what you described, and it will be a kind of reversion to the status quo of the 90s and 2000s.
Yeah, don't make me tell. You said don't make us bring up Collateral again. Don't make me bring up the defense travel system again.
I'll just do that. Anything but DTS.
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't disagree, but it's two big stories because the cost of the exquisite platform. This is still very much an exquisite tool, and it's a proof concept of America can both develop cost-effective new technologies that are still exquisite, but at scale and mass. Like if successful, you can kind of have your cake and eat it too, because a Shaheed can't do what a CCA can do, like not even close. And a CCA is much more expensive than a Shaheed, but I don't think a Shaheed will ever shoot down a CCA. That thing does not sit around slow enough, long enough for you to get your hands on it.
Maybe not a Shaheed, but I mean, the drive is for more and more formerly exquisite capability to live in smaller and smaller and more attritable platforms. So I think that future is still out there. And it's certainly what the asymmetric, foes of America are going to want to deploy, if at all possible. So we shall see. We'll also see maybe some downstream illumination on what exactly happened over the Strait of Hormuz with that 64.
If it's aliens, I expect everyone to call me and tell me that I was right.
I'm still waiting for that next disclosure drop from whatever it is, war.gov/.
That's how they get you. They want you looking at that when the aliens are actually right there shooting down our Apaches.
Part of me does believe that the aliens are right there, always. But let's not go too deep into that. I'm wearing a shirt from one of my favorite apparel brands, Filson. And I'll say two things quickly about Filson. First, awful customer service, like awful.
Ooh,
I've tried to
brutal.
do bulk orders, but as a company, through multiple different front and side doors. They ignore email requests to buy, 1,000x of your expensive, heavy cotton, amazing clothing. They just straight ignore it. I'm like, dude, not like money, Filson. Dude, do you just make so much that you don't have to care about the customer experience? It's crazy. I doubt anybody from Filson's listening to the podcast, but if you are, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to resume that order that I started 2 years ago that your, bulk distributor ignored. Just let me know. Second, I just freaking love Filson. It's so comfortable. It's so good. I just love the gear. So even though they have bad customer service, I'm likely to remain a customer, which is probably exactly what Filson really wants to hear. On the topic of apparel, talk to us, Simon, about Psychoframe.
Excellent transition there. That was really well done. Masterfully done.
Master of segues, dude. It's my nickname.
Psychoframe is a death metal band. Really incomprehensible death metal band if you don't already like death metal. But Psychoframe is a Gundam reference, which is it's a sort of a 2 for me because I also really like Gundam, which is a whole nother rabbit hole of stuff. But great band name, Psychoframe. Even if you don't know what it is, it sounds scary and weird and cool, and that rocks. That's what it's all about.
I'm actually remembering that you've worn that on the pod before. I've asked you about that before, and I neglected. And I'll take this one straight on the chin. I neglected to do my research and listen to some Psychoframe. So I will report back.
There's shirts that I wear that I'm like, you should check them out. I don't know that anyone should check out Psychoframe unless death metal's already a thing in your life to some extent.
That's a good question. Have we done enough Goat Rodeo episodes now where Simon is out of tees?
Yeah, we're repeating t-shirts for sure. Yeah.
We're repeating tees?
We're beyond the limits. I mean, I have stacks of them in like plastic bins, but I'm not digging those out. I don't wear those.
Producer Ian, how many episodes deep are we? 60 or 58, 59? Something in that range, yeah? 57. So Simon,
57.
I mean, it doesn't surprise me that Simon doesn't own more than 57 shirts. That's a lot of shirts. But
I own a reasonable number of t-shirts. Yeah.
I want to congratulate you, Simon, on your choices week to week on this podcast. I will commit against your recommendation to listen to whichever track you offer up as the track.
I'll drop
to
it in Slack.
Drop it in Slack to me, and I'll give it a listen and report back next week. Okay, who wants the final word, or are we done? Was that a good enough final word? That might be it.
Psychoframe is the final word. I just love that word.
Psychoframe is the final word. With that, everybody, thank you for joining us. We will see you next week. And Simon, do you need me to send you a new shirt? I'll send you a new shirt.
Yeah, I won't say no shirts. Love a t-shirt.
I got you. I got you. I'm going to send it. What size do you wear?
Extra large.
Extra large. It's for those biceps. All right. Thanks, everybody. We will see you next time. Adios.